Hello everyone, I'm going to walk through exercise 5 retouching, just like if I was in a class with you. That way I'm going to download the pictures, I'm going to walk through where, put them into a folder to export them. Now this isn't a typical workflow through Lightroom by just taking one file and matching it to another file. Typically you're going to be taking pictures off your camera, download them off your memory card into some type of on your hard drive or an external hard drive, and then you're going to be sorting them and editing them and retouching them and exporting them. So this is going to be a little atypical. It's still going to teach you a lot of the basic tools in Lightroom, but it is a good learning opportunity, and I'm just going to sort of walk you through it. That way you'll see exactly what I'm doing, so maybe you won't have some of the problems a beginner would have. One of the things right off the bat that I'm a little weary of with this file is, for some reason, the unedited image is a very low resolution file, where my edited image is a higher resolution file. Typically, I'd like to have a higher resolution file to edit with, but I can make do. But it will give me a couple of challenges in Lightroom, and this whole project is sort of like a problem solving for you, and I think it'll be helpful with that. But as you create your context sheets and work through the semesters, it'll get easier for you, and it'll make a little bit more sense about why you use Lightroom. So first thing I'm going to do is just download these pictures, and I'm going to download them just to my download folder. And then from there, I'm going to move them to the desktop to a folder, and I'll call the folder exercise 5. So I'm going to take those two files I downloaded, and I'm going to place them in this folder. That way they're on the desktop, and I did clean this desktop up for you. I'm bad about putting stuff on here, but I typically will keep all my photos in the picture folder, and there's a lot of stuff in here. And the way I set my images up in Lightroom is I'll create a folder for each year, and then I'll make one for each month. So each month has pictures in it, and in Lightroom I can edit those pictures and I can sort them, and I can if I need to export them, I'll do so for various projects. So my two images are in here now, and I'm going to open up Lightroom, and I have a catalog for 2014. So typically what I'll do is I'll make a catalog for every year, or for every project. If I'm shooting a wedding or something, I'll make a catalog just for that, or if it's even a class for SCAD. And then and that project is going to also, this file, catalog file, also sits in my picture folder. This is something I don't want to delete, so it's right here. This is this folder that I'm open. This is the actual catalog that all these previews are at. So what I'll do for this project, I'll just create a new folder, a new catalog, and I'll start over. I could just import into this current catalog for 2014, but I'll make a new one just for this class, just so I can keep up with it. Now, what I'll typically do is I'll import my files, and I'll go into if it's in this particular month, and I'll go through and add attributes to my files. So what I'll do is I'll tag them usually. So I'll flag my pictures, and that's P on the keyboard if you want to use that. So these are all the pictures from this month that I have flagged that I want to keep. So what it does, it hides everything else, so I don't see all the rest of the pictures. It doesn't delete anything. All my pictures are in here, but it'll just flag the ones I want to use. And then from those flags, I can add them to a collection. So collection, for instance, I have some for this baby right here, and those are just the pictures for that. And then once I get in here, I might want to go through and edit some more, so I might unflag some of them and flag more of them. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, and this is something I can walk through more later, and something we can talk about. But like I said, it's more of a typical workflow for me, where we're just going to be creating, editing one file. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to just create a new catalog, and I'll save it in my picture folder, and I'll call it SCAD PHOT 113. And I'm going to skip back up my catalog this time. Okay, now let's open up this new catalog, and you'll notice there's going to be there'll be nothing in the catalog whenever it opens. Okay. So what I want to do is import these pictures. So when I press import, it will either copy them as a digital negative, and this is good if I'm shooting RAW in my camera, and almost all cameras are going to have their own RAW format. So what Adobe's done is they created this file format that they're going to endorse and say they're going to hold up to, just like a JPEG. And as new cameras come out, new versions of Adobe comes out, they're always going to support DNG files if you convert them. So we can either we could copy those files. If I want to copy the file on my desktop and copy it to my picture folder, I could move it. I could actually take those images and actually move them. So if I look here on my desktop, there's exercise 5. I can move them if I want to move them to my picture folder, or I could just add them. If I add it, it's going to stay in their destination. So I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to add it. But one thing I do not want to do if when I'm working on my pictures in Lightroom is move these files, the original location of these files. So once I have them imported into Lightroom, I don't want to move this folder somewhere or delete these files or stick them somewhere else. Because what Lightroom does is it creates these previews of your files. So your actual files are never being actually processed until you export them. So what it doesn't export, it really just creates a new version of that file, and it makes it it keeps the quality in the file. It's not going to be stretched and pulled and really pixels cut out of it or anything done to the file. It just, when you export your file, it's going to make a copy of it, whatever changes you made. So all your changes are going to stay in this catalog. So what I don't want to do, and this is something people do typically, is maybe I'm going to say, well, I'll make me a new folder and I'll call it PHOT 113, and I'll put my exercise 5 folder in there. So when I do this, I'm going to get an error message right here, and it's telling me this folder is missing. And you'll notice right here it's going to give me, if you look, there's a little it's telling me that it cannot find the original file. So what you can do is you can relocate it. If I want to relocate it, I can. This is the unedited one. I can do that. Or I can go back and I can move that file back where it was at, the original location. Okay, so the first thing I want to do to work on these is I want to look at the changes, the differences in the two files. And I'm going to select both of them, and then I'm going to hit N, and N is like a survey mode. It's just letting me look at 2 at one time. So if I look at the changes of the 2 files, I'll notice this is my after image. This is what our goal is to obtain to look like this picture. Okay, I notice that the cropping is different. I notice that they cropped it about right here at her shoulder. They cropped out the chair. They cropped out the edge of the chalkboard. That's the first thing I see. Then I noticed that they cleaned up her face. She has a couple of freckles and moles on her face. They took that out. I also noticed where she has a little bit of a color cast here, and it looks like the whole picture looks a little bit too magenta. So I want to warm the image up a little bit and try to fix that. Now, most of your problems with your color correction is going to be due to your white balance. So if you're shooting in RAW format again, that's going to fix a lot of your problems. It's not going to fix everything because you could have different types of light sources, and all of those are going to create a different color. So that's not going to fix everything. But working from a JPEG file is probably not going to be the greatest move. It would be better if I had a RAW file that I could work from. So first thing to do, let's just go ahead and we're going to go from our library to our develop module, and I'm going to make some changes to this file here to make it match this one. So I'm going to click on develop, and this is our edited file. Now I want to show you the big problem I have. as I cannot zoom in on this picture because it's a low resolution file. If I go back to my edited version, I can go in here and zoom in to retouch it and to work on it. Where here I cannot do that. It will not let me zoom because it's already pretty much at 100%. Now, the way this is set up with your with the workflow for editing your image is you want to go from the top down. So what I want to do is look at my histogram. This is a pretty balanced histogram, and we'll be talking about that later in this course. This goes from black to white. I notice there's no blown out highlights. Shadows are highlights, but this other version, it's got it's a little bit darker. You can notice underneath her hair here, it looks darker than that. And we have a crop tool. We have a clone tool, a spot removal tool. We have a red eye reduction tool, red eye correction. We have a gradient tool, filter, radial filter, and then we have this adjustment brush. And this adjustment brush is a great tool because you can make changes the slightest areas and do like burning and dodging techniques like you could do in a traditional darkroom. And then we have our white balance tool, and then we have our exposures, adjustments, and contrast. And then it goes on down from there. We can really get into the contrast. We turn on the tone curve. We can adjust the contrast. It looks more like the curves tool in Photoshop. And then we have a black and white conversion tool. And we can also adjust this particular colors in that. I could probably do some color correction just using that if I wanted to. And then we have a split tone it if I want to make this a sepia picture or blue tone it. We can adjust the sharpening on this. We can reduce noise. We can fix lens corrections. We can actually calibrate Lightroom to the lens that you used. We can add effects such as a vignette or grain to make the picture look noisier or more like film. And then we can also set this up to the calibration of our camera, our particular camera. So we can actually calibrate to our camera or lens, which is a little bit more advanced, but today we're just going to stick pretty much right up in here in this area. So the first thing we want to do is just crop this picture to match the other one. So if I go back to the other one again, again I notice it was cropped through here, across the top of the head, down this side, so it's cropped all the way around. Now when I click the crop tool, I have my aspect ratio locked. Now if I have it locked, it's going to keep my ratio exactly the same. So if I shot it out of my camera, it's going to be a 2:3 ratio. That means this side is a third larger than this side. So that's what you call a 2:3 ratio. And that's probably what I would use if I was going to get these printed in a lab. If I wanted to give somebody 4:6s, that's a 2:3 ratio. Or if I didn't typically crop my work. If it's going to go online, it doesn't really matter as much. It's just when I want to print it, I got to think about if they're going to crop out part of the picture when it's printed. But we look at this other image. If I want to get back into my other image, I got to press done for that. I'll notice it looks like it's a little bit different aspect ratio. So I click back on the crop tool. I'm just going to turn this off. Now it has presets. I can set it to a 5:7, 8.5:11. You can create a custom one. But I'm going to go in here and try to match up that other image a little bit. So I'm kind of guessing at this a little bit. Let's see how that looks. Okay, it looks pretty close. Looks like they cropped a little bit more off here and a little less up here. So what's nice about Lightroom is it didn't really crop anything. It's still there. And we're going to go up here a little bit more. Okay, let's look at that again. Okay, so that looks pretty close cropping wise. Now the next thing I want to do, and again, it's just a white balance. So what I'm going to do is click on the white balance brush, And I'll turn off this auto demise and the show loop. I don't like this loop on here. If you notice over here, I can see what the picture's going to look like after I pick an area. Now what I want to do is pick something neutral if I want to color balance this picture. But I'm going to click it once and see how it looks, but I'm going to have to adjust it with the temperature and tint sliders over here. So I'm going to look around, and first thing I'll do is I want to turn off this show loop first. I don't like seeing that. I don't really need it. I'm going to look over here instead. And I can turn off this auto dismiss. So auto dismiss, if I press it once, it's going to go back out of the white balance tool, but if I click off the auto dismiss, it stays on. So I'm going to look for a neutral area. It's probably right in there. Looks pretty good. So I'm just clicking on that chalkboard, and I'll click on done. And let's look at our original, our retouched file. It looks like it's still a little bit warmer, and it's a little bit darker. Now I notice a big difference in this background. This is where it's going to be really tricky. This area has some light coming off of it, reflected onto it some way, and it's making it has a different color that's than a natural chalkboard is going to be. So I'm going to have to probably go in and create a local brush and change the color of that chalkboard. Okay, so maybe I'll make this a little bit warmer, and then what I can do still is I'll go back in and I can make changes to this, but I'm going to work my way down. Now, how I typically adjust my exposure is I hold down the Option key, and what I'm looking for is any blown out highlights. So I notice right here across her nose, it is blown out, and this tip of her hand right here. So to fix that, I can either adjust the exposure, and fix it. It's going to make the whole picture underexposed though, or I can just come in here and adjust the highlights and do it. So I'm going to cut back the highlights. So that fixed any blown out areas in the highlights. Now I can look at the shadows and see if there's any areas that are blocked up. The shadows actually look pretty good in this image. I'm going to go back to the other image and look at it. It's not too bad. Okay, it's not too bad. This picture looks a little bit more underexposed in this picture though, so I'm going to adjust the exposure back a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, now the only thing I really notice, we still got to retouch her face, and we need to change this chalkboard in the background. So let's do the retouching next. So you notice we use the crop tool. I went down here and I used the white balance tool. And I'm going to go back up here and use the this adjustment brush, which is going to be like using a clone tool or the healing brush in Photoshop. So I'm going to clone the area, and what I can do is use my bracket keys just like I can do in Photoshop and adjust the size of this area that I want to clone. Okay, now this is where I really need a high resolution file, but what I can do in this picture is I can actually zoom in on it, click on my brush, and then I can work from here. But you'll notice with this other file I can't zoom in. This is what's throwing me off a little bit. So I cannot zoom in with this file. So I'm going to click on this clone tool, and I'm going to click on this mole right here. And what I'll do is just find another spot on the picture. It's going to try to auto select it for me, and I can move this around. This is where it's going to clone from, and this is the area that I want to retouch. So I can move this around if I want to, and what I'll do is find something very similar to it, and I can also make this smaller if I want to. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. Okay, and then I can click on the next one and do the same thing right here. Move it to a spot similar and maybe make that a little bit smaller too. Got one on her nose. I got one on her chin right here. We got one right there. Okay, so let's hit done and see how it looks. Now, they all look okay except for that one. So what I can do is I can click back on this again. I can click on this. Now I can adjust, maybe adjust the feathering, make a little softer edge on it. Maybe go back and move this again. So this is kind of nice. I can move this around. I can make it bigger. I can move it. Let's make this a little smaller. Okay, let's hit done. It's still off a little bit. Now one thing, if I don't like it all, I can just hit delete and to get rid of it altogether. So let's do that and we're going to try it again. So let me click this spot right here. Let's see how that looks. Another option could be to switch over to the healing brush. So I'm getting a little bit of edge around that. And part of the problem is, because I can't zoom in on it. There we go. That looks better. Now let's compare it with the other image again. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, now let's go ahead and change this background of this picture. The color a little bit. You can notice right here it's a little bit more blue than it is here. So to make that adjustment, I'm going to click on this adjustment brush. And what it's going to allow me to do is just paint any area I want to. So when I do it first, sometimes, and I can use any of these adjustments here. I can change the color of it. There's pretty much any setting that I could use in my tools I can use for this. So let's close that. Pretty much any of these. So I got exposure, contrast, I got the color, temperature, and tint. And that's what I'm mostly concerned about, is I'm going to change that a little bit. So what I'm going to do is go in and just paint this area. And like I said, it doesn't matter at this point. I'll use the exposure and just set it down so I can really see what I'm doing. Now if I'm not real good with my brush, I can go back and erase it. I'm getting it on the hair a little bit there. So I can always go in and erase this a little bit. Okay. So what I'll do now, instead of using the exposure, I'm going to set that back to the middle. Is I want to use this to kind of change the color a little bit. So let's compare that to the other background. That looks pretty close. Okay, so what I can do too, if I want to go back and change it again, I'll click on this. And I'm going to click on this to make changes to it. And you'll notice it gives me a quick mask. If I hover over it, it shows me what area I'm actually affecting with this. And I can go back and adjust it some more if I want to. So I'll just adjust the temperature a little bit. And I can hit done. Now let's compare these two. Okay, only other thing I noticed, it looks like her face is a little bit softer on the retouch the image. I'm going to click back on basic down here, and I'm going to go into clarity, and I'm going to slide it to the left just a little bit. This will give it a glow. Let's please don't overdo it, and this is going to make things look, give it more of a fine edge. So I'm going to bump this down just a little bit right here. I'm thinking that's pretty close. I might go back in one more time and adjust the temperature to this a little bit. Okay, I think that's pretty close to the the edited image. Now the other thing I want to do with this is I want to export it, and I'm going to save it as a JPEG, which it is. And to do that, I need to go back to my library modes, the easiest way. And I got this one. I can just double click. I'm going to hit G to go back to my grid view, and I'm going to deselect the other picture and just select a new one. Now you'll notice it has these little boxes on here that shows me that I cropped it and did some exposure changes. So let's look at them one more time. I think those are pretty close, you know, to the original image, or the one that he's got. I do notice the hair looks a little bit sharper, but I got to remember too, this is a high resolution file and this one isn't. Let's go back and adjust that clarity a little bit more. Let's go back and not set it so strong. So I'm even thinking, I think it's just because it's a little pixelated. I don't believe we're going to be able to fix that totally. Okay, so I'm going to click on export here. Okay, when I click on export, it's going to give me a lot of options. Now one thing is I can put it in a specific folder, and I can go back and choose the folder as original photo, and that'll be fine for right now. But I do want to rename the file, so I'm going to call it my first initial last name and then underscore ex5. Okay, I want to just do a file name. I don't need this, so I'm going to take this off. Okay, so that should match that. And then I want it on JPEG. I'll leave the color space on sRGB, and I'm not going to resize this file or sharpen it, because I'm going to leave it like the original. That original file is already low resolution. And I'm going to turn off this watermark. A watermark is something I can show you later, but it allows me to put my logo on a picture if I'm going to put it on my website or Facebook or something. That way hopefully nobody will steal it and try to print it. But everything else looks okay. Now I did put the resolution at 72, but I did not change the size of the file. So it's going to make the file as big as it can at 72 ppi. And the assignment does not state the size to make this, so I'm not going to resize it or anything. Okay, so I'm going to go to export. Okay, it says the task is complete. Okay, if I go up here, it looks like it exported both of them. Okay, so what that means is when I exported this, I must have had both of the files selected, which I did. So this is another basic mistake you could have. So I'm going to go back to my grid view. In grid views, this can give me a smaller version. I can just hit G for grid on the keyboard, as I don't want both of those files selected. So I'm going to go back and just delete this so you can see the difference. Okay, I got that file selected. I'm going to go to export. Make sure you have the correct file. You don't have the original file selected. And then I'm going to hit it again. I'll press export. Everything else is going to be the same. Okay, there's my file, and this is what I want to upload back to Blackboard. I hope this made some sense to you. I wanted to show you that you know, there's some other things I could have probably done to it to work on. I probably could adjust the contrast a little bit more, but you know, this file, you know, wasn't a whole lot of differences in it to start with. You know, other than fixing the color was a bigger concern, and you know, I darkened the file a little bit. But there's going to be multiple ways to change the picture to adjust it, and as we go through the course, you know, you'll be able to see some more of those changes.